I never thought a pile of firewood would turn into a war with my homeowners association. But here I was, staring at a $300 fine taped to my front door on a cold January morning in Boulder Creek, Colorado. My name is Walter Armstrong, and I had moved into the Pine Valley Estates subdivision about 8 months prior. The neighborhood sat nestled in the foothills just outside town, with 60 homes spread across winding roads and mountain views. I worked remotely as a software engineer, which gave me the freedom to live somewhere quieter while still making decent money. The house itself was perfect, a 3-bedroom craftsman with a stone fireplace that became the centerpiece of my winter evenings. That fireplace was exactly why I had ordered a cord of firewood from Mountain Ridge Timber, a local supplier about 15 miles away. The delivery truck had arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, driven by a friendly guy named Tom who helped me stack the wood in my driveway before moving it to the backyard. The whole process took maybe 40 minutes. I tipped him $20, watched him leave, and thought nothing more of it. Until that fine appeared 3 days later. The notice was printed on official Pine Valley Estates letterhead, signed by Patricia Meadowbrook, the HOA president. It cited violation code 7.3.2, which apparently prohibited commercial vehicle traffic within the subdivision without prior written approval. The fine was $300, payable within 14 days, with an additional $50 late fee if not received by the deadline. I stood there in my driveway, the January wind cutting through my jacket, reading the notice 3 times to make sure I understood it correctly. They were fining me because a delivery truck brought firewood to my house, not because the truck damaged anything, not because it blocked traffic or caused a disturbance, simply because it existed on their precious streets. I went inside and pulled out the HOA covenant document I had received at closing. It was 78 pages of dense legal text that I had skimmed through but never fully digested. I found section 7.3.2 on page 41. It stated that commercial vehicles over 10,000 pounds were prohibited from entering the subdivision except for emergency services, scheduled utility maintenance, or with advance written permission from the HOA board. The firewood delivery truck was probably around 14,000 pounds, so technically, they had me. But the thing that really irritated me was the petness of it. I called Tom at Mountain Ridge Timber and asked if anyone had complained during the delivery. He said no, everything had been smooth, and he had made hundreds of deliveries to subdivisions all over the county without issues. This was the first time anyone had ever been fined for receiving firewood. I decided to attend the next HOA board meeting, which was scheduled for the following Tuesday at the community center. I figured I could explain the situation, maybe get the fine waived since I genuinely had no idea about the rule, and move on with my life. The community center was a small building near the subdivision entrance, with a meeting room that could hold maybe 30 people. When I arrived at 6:30, there were already a dozen residents scattered across the folding chairs. The board sat at a table up front, Patricia Meadowbrook in the center, flanked by 4 other board members whose names I would soon learn. Patricia was exactly what you would picture when someone says HOA president. She was probably 55, with blonde hair cut in that specific style that screamed middle management, wearing a pantsuit that looked like it came from a department store clearance rack. She had reading glasses on a chain around her neck and a leather portfolio in front of her that she kept tapping with a pen. The meeting started with standard business. They discussed the landscaping budget for the common areas, approved a request from someone to install a fence, and debated the color restrictions for exterior house paint. When they opened the floor for resident comments, I raised my hand. Patricia looked at me over her glasses. "Yes, you in the back." I stood up. "Hi, I am Walter Armstrong from 847 Timber Ridge Lane. I received a fine for having a firewood delivery and I wanted to discuss it." Her expression did not change. "Mr. Armstrong, commercial vehicle restrictions are clearly outlined in the covenant. Ignorance of the rules is not an exemption." "I understand that," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But I had no idea about the rule and the delivery was quick and caused no problems. I am asking if the board would consider waiving the fine as a one-time courtesy." One of the other board members, a man named Dennis, leaned forward. "If we waive fines for everyone who claims they did not know the rules, then we might as well not have rules at all." "I am not asking for everyone," I said. "I am asking for myself as a new resident who made an honest mistake." Patricia shuffled some papers. "The fine stands, Mr. Armstrong. Please submit payment by the deadline to avoid additional penalties. Next item of business." I remained standing. "Can I at least get clarification on the approval process? If I need future deliveries, how do I get permission?" Patricia sighed like I was wasting her valuable time. "You submit a written request to the HOA board at least 7 business days in advance, detailing the nature of the delivery, the size and weight of the vehicle, the date and time of arrival, and the expected duration. The board reviews requests at our monthly meetings. So if I need something delivered, I have to wait up to a month for approval. Planning ahead is part of responsible homeownership," Patricia said. "Now, if there is nothing else, we need to move forward." I sat down, frustrated but not defeated. I paid the fine online that night, $300 gone just like that. But as I clicked the submit button, something else clicked in my mind. If they wanted to play games about delivery trucks, I could play too. The next morning, I started researching. The subdivision had a main entrance on Meadowbrook Drive, which connected to Highway 72. That was the route every delivery truck, mail carrier, and service vehicle used to access the homes. But when I looked at the property survey maps available through the county assessor's office, I noticed something interesting. The back portion of the subdivision, where about 15 homes were located including mine, actually bordered an old logging road called Forest Service Road 137. It was public land, maintained by the county, and it connected to Highway 72 about 2 miles north of the main subdivision entrance. More importantly, it did not go through any HOA-controlled streets. I drove out there that afternoon to check it out. The road was unpaved but well-maintained, used by hikers and forestry vehicles. It ran along the back fence line of several properties, and I realized that my property line actually extended to within about 30 feet of the road. There was a thick line of pine trees between my backyard and the road, but nothing that could not be addressed. Over the next week, I worked on a plan. I contacted a local surveyor to verify my property boundaries, which confirmed that I could legally create an access point from Forest Service Road 137 to my property. I checked with the county planning department about permits and learned that since it was for personal use and did not require significant grading or environmental disruption, I only needed a basic land use permit that cost $75 and took about 2 weeks to process. I hired a local contractor to clear a path through the trees and install a gravel driveway from the logging road to my backyard. The whole project cost about $4,000, but I saw it as an investment in principle. If the HOA wanted to control access through their streets, fine. I would stop using their streets. The work was completed in early February. I now had a secondary entrance to my property that bypassed the subdivision entirely. The first test came when I needed another half-cord of firewood. I called Tom at Mountain Ridge Timber and gave him the new delivery instructions. "You want me to come in through the logging road?" he asked, sounding confused. "Exactly," I said. "I will text you the GPS coordinates. Just follow Forest Service Road 137 about 2 miles past the Highway 72 junction, and you will see my driveway on the left. There is a gate, but I will have it open." "Whatever you say, man. Your firewood, your rules." The delivery went perfectly. Tom drove up the logging road, turned into my new driveway, and unloaded the wood directly into my backyard. He never touched a single HOA street. I was probably the happiest I had been since moving to Pine Valley Estates, but the real victory came 2 weeks later. I was working from home when my doorbell rang. It was Patricia Meadowbrook, holding her leather portfolio and wearing a strained smile that did not reach her eyes. "Mr. Armstrong, do you have a moment?" she asked. "Sure, what can I do for you?" She glanced at her portfolio. "There have been complaints from residents about commercial vehicles using Forest Service Road 137 to access properties in this subdivision." I leaned against the doorframe. "The logging road is county property, not HOA jurisdiction." "Yes, but the deliveries are still coming to homes within Pine Valley Estates. Actually, they are coming to my property through a legal access point that does not use any HOA roads. I checked with the county. Everything is completely above board." Her smile vanished. "This is highly irregular." "So is fining residents $300 for receiving firewood." She opened her portfolio and pulled out a document. "The board wants to ensure that all property access complies with community standards. We may need to implement new restrictions." "You can implement whatever you want for your roads," I said. "But you do not own the county logging road, and you do not control access to my property from public land. Have a nice day, Patricia." I closed the door before she could respond. Through the window, I watched her walk back to her car, her posture rigid with frustration. Over the next month, something interesting started happening. Other residents began asking me about my alternate access route. It turned out I was not the only person annoyed with the HOA's heavy-handed restrictions. Several neighbors who lived along the back section of the subdivision started inquiring about creating their own connections to Forest Service Road 137. One of them was Gary Fletcher, who lived 3 houses down from me. He was a retired contractor who had been feuding with Patricia for years over various petty violations. When I explained what I had done, his eyes lit up. "You are telling me I could bypass these HOA clowns entirely?" he asked. "If your property extends to the logging road, absolutely. Get a surveyor to verify your boundaries, file for a land use permit with the county, and hire someone to clear a path. The HOA cannot stop you because you are using public road access." Gary got the ball rolling within days. So did 3 other neighbors. By mid-March, 5 properties along the back section of the subdivision had created alternate access routes through Forest Service Road 137. We started calling ourselves the Back Road Coalition, jokingly at first, but it stuck. The HOA board was furious. Patricia sent out a strongly worded letter to all residents claiming that the alternate access routes violated the spirit of the community and degraded property values. She threatened legal action, but her hands were tied. We had not violated any HOA rules because we were not using HOA property. Then came the April board meeting, and that was when things got really interesting. I attended out of curiosity, along with Gary and 2 other Back Road Coalition members. The meeting room was more crowded than usual, with about 25 residents present. Patricia called the meeting to order and immediately launched into a presentation about the alternate access route situation. "These unauthorized entrances are creating problems for our community," she declared, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation on a projector screen. "We have seen increased traffic on Forest Service Road 137, noise complaints and potential security issues." Gary raised his hand. "Those are public roads. Anyone can use them. But concentrated delivery traffic is disrupting the natural environment and affecting quality of life for nearby residents," Patricia countered. "You mean it is disrupting your ability to control everything that happens in this neighborhood?" I said. Patricia glared at me. "Mr. Armstrong, this board exists to maintain community standards and protect property values. No, this board exists to manage common areas and enforce reasonable restrictions," I said. "Fining people for receiving firewood deliveries is not reasonable." Several residents clapped. Patricia's face turned red. Dennis, the other board member who had spoken at my first meeting, cleared his throat. "The board is proposing a new covenant amendment that would require all property access to use designated HOA entrances only. Alternate access points would be prohibited." "You cannot enforce that," Gary said. "You do not own our property and you do not control public roads. The covenant governs all properties within Pine Valley Estates boundaries," Dennis replied. "But access from outside those boundaries is not subject to HOA control," I said. "You would need to prove that our alternate access routes cause specific, measurable harm to the community. Otherwise, any restriction is arbitrary and unenforceable." Patricia stood up abruptly. "This discussion is not productive. The board will consult with our attorney and determine the appropriate course of action." The meeting dissolved into chaos after that, with residents arguing among themselves about property rights versus community standards. I left feeling energized. The HOA had overplayed their hand, and they knew it. 2 weeks later, I received a certified letter from a law firm in Denver representing the Pine Valley Estates, HOA. The letter demanded that I cease using the alternate access route and restore my property to its original condition. It claimed that my driveway constituted a nuisance and violated unspecified community standards. The letter gave me 30 days to comply or face legal action. I took the letter to an attorney in Boulder named Michael Chen, who specialized in property law. He read it carefully, then set it down on his desk. "This is garbage," he said bluntly. "They have no legal basis to prevent you from accessing your property through public roads." That is what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. The HOA covenant can regulate what happens on their roads and common areas, but they cannot prevent you from using legal access points on public land. It would be like them trying to prevent you from receiving mail because the postal truck uses public streets. It is nonsense. "So what should I do?" Michael leaned back in his chair. "I will draft a response explaining that you are in full compliance with all applicable laws and regulations, and that any attempt to restrict your legal property access will be viewed as harassment. We will also point out that if they pursue litigation, you will countersue for attorney fees and damages." He sent the letter a week later. The HOA's attorney never responded, but Patricia was not done. In May, the board implemented a new policy requiring all delivery vehicles serving Pine Valley Estates properties to display an HOA-approved permit sticker. The permits cost $50 per vehicle and were valid for 6 months. Any delivery company that did not display a valid permit would be refused entry at the subdivision gates. The policy caused immediate problems for residents. Amazon delivery drivers, FedEx trucks, mail carriers, and every other service suddenly needed permits. The subdivision entrance gate started turning away delivery vehicles, creating massive backlogs and missed deliveries. Most residents were furious. The HOA board insisted it was a necessary security measure, but the real purpose was obvious to anyone paying attention. They were trying to discourage delivery traffic, which they believed would force the Back Road Coalition members to give up their alternate access routes. It had exactly the opposite effect. Because our properties used Forest Service Road 137, we did not need to deal with the HOA gate at all. Our delivery drivers bypassed the entire permit system. While other residents waited days for packages because their delivery trucks were turned away, we received everything on schedule through the back route. This did not go unnoticed. More residents started asking about creating their own alternate access points. The problem was that only properties along the back section of the subdivision had feasible connections to the logging road. Everyone else was stuck with the main entrance and Patricia's permit system. By mid-June, the neighborhood had effectively split into two groups: those who supported the HOA board and their strict policies, and those who thought Patricia had gone too far and needed to be replaced. The annual HOA election was scheduled for September, and several residents announced they would run for board positions. Then came the incident that changed everything. In late June, a massive wildfire broke out about 10 miles west of Boulder Creek. The fire spread rapidly through the dry forest, and within 2 days, evacuation orders were issued for several areas, including parts of Pine Valley Estates. Emergency vehicles needed quick access to the subdivision to help residents evacuate. The problem was Patricia's new permit system. The fire department trucks did not have HOA permit stickers, and when they arrived at the main gate, there was confusion about letting them through. Someone had to call Patricia to get her approval to open the gates for emergency vehicles, which wasted precious minutes. Meanwhile, the Back Road Coalition members were evacuating through Forest Service Road 137, which had direct highway access and no gates or restrictions. Emergency personnel quickly realized the logging road provided better access to the back section of the subdivision, and they started using it for evacuation coordination. The fire never reached Pine Valley Estates, fortunately. It was contained about 5 miles away after a week of intense firefighting efforts. But the evacuation debacle became a major scandal. Residents were furious that Patricia's permit system had delayed emergency response, and the local fire department filed a formal complaint with the county. At the July board meeting, the room was packed with angry residents. Patricia tried to defend the permit system, claiming it was just a miscommunication, but people were not buying it. A woman named Rebecca stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. "My son has asthma. When the evacuation order came, we needed to leave immediately. But fire department vehicles were delayed at the gate because of your ridiculous permits. You put lives at risk for your power trip." The room erupted in agreement. Patricia tried to restore order, but people kept shouting. Finally, Gary stood up and called for a vote of no confidence in the board. It was not technically part of the meeting agenda, but Patricia could not stop it. By a show of hands, 32 residents voted no confidence. Only 4 supported the board. Patricia resigned on the spot, along with Dennis and one other board member. The remaining 2 board members immediately suspended the permit system and scheduled a special election for August to fill the vacant positions. I thought that was the end of it. Patricia was gone, the permit system was canceled, and things could return to normal. But I underestimated how vindictive someone could be when they lost power. In early August, I received a call from Tom at Mountain Ridge Timber. He sounded stressed. "Walter, we have got a problem." Someone filed a complaint with the county about our deliveries on Forest Service Road 137. What kind of complaint? They are claiming we are damaging the road surface and creating environmental hazards. A county inspector came out yesterday and said we need to stop using the logging road for commercial deliveries until they complete an investigation. My stomach dropped. Who filed the complaint? It was anonymous, but I think we both know who it was. Patricia. It had to be. She could not control the HOA anymore, so she went over their heads to the county. I called Michael Chen again and explained the situation. He agreed to look into it, but warned me that county environmental investigations could take months. In the meantime, delivery companies would be hesitant to use Forest Service Road 137 if there was an active complaint. Sure enough, over the next week, several delivery services told me they could not use my back entrance anymore. FedEx, UPS, and Amazon all said their drivers were instructed to avoid the logging road until the county cleared it. Even Tom said his company was putting deliveries on hold. I was furious, but I tried to think strategically. Patricia had found a way to hurt us without directly violating any HOA rules. She filed a bogus complaint with the county, knowing it would tie things up in bureaucracy for months. But two could play that game. I spent a weekend researching county records and discovered something fascinating. Patricia Meadowbrook did not just live in Pine Valley Estates. She also owned a rental property in a different subdivision called Clearwater Hills, about 5 miles away. That property had a small business registered to the address, something called Meadowbrook Consulting LLC. I dug deeper. Meadowbrook Consulting was Patricia's side business where she did consulting work for other HOAs around the region. She helped them draft covenant amendments, enforcement policies, and fee structures. Basically, she advised other HOA boards on how to be as controlling as she was. The interesting part was how she ran the business. According to county tax records, she received deliveries at her Clearwater Hills property regularly. Office supplies, furniture, equipment, all delivered by commercial trucks to a residential address. Clearwater Hills had an HOA too. I pulled their covenant documents from the county clerk's office and found that they had almost identical language to Pine Valley Estates, including restrictions on commercial vehicle traffic without prior approval. I made some calls and learned that Clearwater Hills had a very hands-off HOA board. They basically left residents alone unless there were major issues. Patricia had never bothered to request approval for her business deliveries because no one had ever enforced the rule, until now. I filed a formal complaint with the Clearwater Hills HOA board, detailing the commercial deliveries to Patricia's property and the lack of required approvals. I included photos, shipping records I obtained through public information requests, and copies of their covenant restrictions. Then I filed a separate complaint with the county, claiming that Patricia's business operations at her residential property violated zoning regulations. I included evidence that she was running a consulting business with regular commercial activity from a home that was zoned for residential use only. Both complaints were completely legitimate. Patricia had been breaking rules she claimed to care so much about, just at a different property where no one was watching. The county inspector who visited her property was the same one who had investigated the logging road complaint. According to Gary, who had connections at the county office, the inspector was not pleased to discover that Patricia had filed what appeared to be a retaliatory complaint against us, while simultaneously violating zoning laws herself. The investigation into Forest Service Road 137 was quietly dropped in mid-August. The inspector filed a report stating there was no evidence of environmental damage or road deterioration beyond normal use. Delivery companies were cleared to resume using the logging road. Meanwhile, Patricia received a citation from the county for operating a business in a residential zone without proper permits. She also received multiple fines from the Clearwater Hills HOA for unauthorized commercial deliveries, totaling over $1,200. But here is where things took an unexpected turn. In September, the special HOA election brought in a completely new board. Gary was elected president, and several other Back Road Coalition members won seats. One of their first actions was to commission a comprehensive audit of HOA finances under Patricia's leadership. What they found was disturbing. Over the past 3 years, Patricia had been systematically inflating vendor contracts and pocketing the difference. The subdivision's landscaping service, for example, was owned by her brother-in-law. The HOA was paying 30% above market rate for lawn maintenance, with the excess money being kicked back to Patricia under the table. She had also been collecting fines from residents, and in some cases, not properly recording them in the HOA books. The money went into a separate account she controlled, which she used for personal expenses. The audit uncovered over $40,000 in financial irregularities. Gary immediately reported the findings to the Boulder Creek Police Department. Detective Sarah Morrison was assigned to the case. She was a no-nonsense investigator in her early 40s who had dealt with HOA fraud cases before. I spoke with her in late September when she was interviewing residents about their interactions with Patricia. "How common is this kind of thing?" I asked. "More common than you would think," Detective Morrison said. "HOAs handle a lot of money, and when you have a board president with unchecked authority, it creates opportunities for fraud. Most people trust their HOA leadership without asking hard questions. What happens now? We are building a case. If the evidence supports criminal charges, we will arrest her and turn everything over to the district attorney." The investigation took about 6 weeks. During that time, Gary and the new board worked to clean up the HOA's operations. They eliminated unnecessary fines, streamlined the approval process for deliveries and construction projects, and restored trust with residents. They also formally recognized the alternate access routes through Forest Service Road 137 as legitimate and beneficial to the community. In fact, they worked with the county to improve the logging road surface and add better signage, which made it safer and more accessible for everyone. In early November, Detective Morrison arrested Patricia Meadowbrook at her home. She was charged with multiple counts of theft, embezzlement, and fraud. The district attorney's office was pursuing felony charges due to the amount of money involved. The local news covered the story, and it turned out Patricia had been under investigation at 2 other HOAs where she did consulting work. Similar financial irregularities had been discovered, and prosecutors were looking at additional charges. Her trial was scheduled for the following spring, but her attorney negotiated a plea deal in December. Patricia pled guilty to felony theft and agreed to repay all the stolen money plus penalties. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison, though the judge indicated she might be eligible for early release after 1 year with good behavior. The Clearwater Hills HOA also filed a civil lawsuit against her for the zoning violations and unpaid fines, which added to her financial penalties. By the time Christmas rolled around, life in Pine Valley Estates had improved dramatically. The new HOA board was responsive and reasonable. The alternate access routes through Forest Service Road 137 were working well, and several more properties had been approved to create connections to the logging road. But here is the twist that brings everything full circle. In January, almost exactly 1 year after I received that first ridiculous fine for firewood delivery, I needed another cord of wood for the winter. I called Tom at Mountain Ridge Timber to place an order. "Hey, Walter, good to hear from you," Tom said. "Same delivery through the back road." "Actually, I want to ask you something. What is the price difference between delivering through the main subdivision entrance versus the logging road?" "Well, the logging road adds about 15 minutes to the route each way, so I usually add a $30 surcharge for the extra time and fuel." "And before, when you delivered through the main entrance, what did that cost?" "Standard delivery was included in the price. It is on the way, so no extra charge." I did some quick math in my head. "So now every delivery through the back road costs $30 more than it would have through the main entrance." "Yeah, pretty much." "Why?" I laughed. "Just thinking about how this whole thing turned out. The HOA fined me $300 for a delivery that should have been free. So I created an alternate route that now costs an extra $30 per delivery. But here is the kicker. Want to know who pays that extra cost?" "Who?" "The HOA. The new board approved a community bulk purchase program for firewood. They negotiate group orders to get better rates for residents. And the HOA covers delivery fees as a community amenity. So every time someone orders firewood now, the HOA pays that $30 surcharge for deliveries through the logging road instead of getting free delivery through the main entrance." Tom laughed. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. There are about 40 homes in this subdivision that use firewood regularly. Most of them are in the back section now using the logging road route. That is at least 40 deliveries per winter season, probably more. At $30 extra per delivery, the HOA is paying an additional $1,200 or more per year compared to what they would have paid if they had just let you deliver through the main entrance in the first place. That is poetic justice right there. The best part. The new board thinks they are providing great value by covering delivery fees. They have no idea they are paying triple what they would have paid before Patricia went crazy with the fines." I paused, then added, "Actually, it is more than triple. Patricia's legal fees for fighting our alternate access routes probably cost the HOA at least $10,000. The permit system debacle cost them another $5,000 in wasted administrative time and materials. And the financial audit after her arrest cost another $8,000. So really, that $300 fine she gave me ended up costing the HOA over $25,000, plus ongoing elevated delivery fees forever." Tom whistled. "Remind me never to get on your bad side. I did not do anything except exercise my legal property rights. Patricia did this to herself and the HOA by being unreasonable. We finalized my firewood order, scheduled for delivery the following Tuesday through the back road. The HOA would pay the delivery surcharge, just like they did for everyone else now." As I hung up the phone, I walked over to my fireplace and looked at the flames crackling away on an oak log. The house was warm and comfortable, exactly what I wanted when I moved here. It had taken a year of fighting with an overbearing HOA president, thousands of dollars in legal and construction costs, and multiple investigations, but things had finally settled into a good place. Gary called me that evening to discuss a community barbecue the new board was planning for the spring. We chatted for a while about neighborhood improvements and the upcoming election to fill the last remaining board seat. "You know, you should run," Gary said. "You have been instrumental in changing this place for the better." "I appreciate that, but I am happy just being a regular resident now. You are doing a great job as president. Well, if you ever change your mind, the offer stands. By the way, how much is the HOA paying for your firewood delivery these days? About $30 more than it should cost, I said with a grin he could probably hear through the phone. Worth it? Absolutely. After we hung up, I made myself dinner and settled in for the evening. The next morning, I had a video call with my manager to discuss a new project at work. Life had returned to normal, or as normal as life gets when you live in an HOA-controlled subdivision, but the story did not quite end there. There was one more development that wrapped everything up perfectly. In February, I received a letter from the district attorney's office asking if I would be willing to provide a victim impact statement for Patricia's sentencing hearing. Even though she had already taken the plea deal, the judge wanted to hear from residents who had been affected by her actions. I agreed, and in early March I found myself in a Boulder County courtroom. Patricia sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, looking much different from the assertive HOA president who had stood in front of board meetings barking orders. She looked small, defeated, tired. The judge, a woman named Carolyn Hughes, asked if I wanted to speak. I stood up and approached the microphone set up for victim statements. Your Honor, my name is Walter Armstrong, and I lived in Pine Valley Estates during the time Patricia Meadowbrook served as HOA president. I want to talk about what her actions cost our community, beyond just the money she stole. Judge Hughes nodded for me to continue. Mrs. Meadowbrook created an environment of fear and control. Residents were afraid to make improvements to their own homes because they might get fined. Families were stressed about receiving deliveries because they might violate some obscure rule. When a wildfire threatened our neighborhood, her policies delayed emergency response. She did not just steal money, she stole our peace of mind and sense of community. I glanced at Patricia. She was staring at the table, not meeting anyone's eyes. But here is what I want the court to understand. The financial crimes were bad, but the abuse of power was worse. She used her position to punish anyone who disagreed with her. She filed false complaints with county agencies to retaliate against residents who found legal ways around her restrictions. She turned a homeowners association, which is supposed to serve the community, into her personal fiefdom. Judge Hughes was taking notes. Is there anything else you would like to add, Mr. Armstrong? Just this. I hope Mrs. Meadowbrook's sentence sends a message to other HOA leaders who think they can abuse their authority. These organizations handle millions of dollars and affect thousands of lives. There has to be accountability. I sat down. Several other residents gave similar statements. By the end of the hearing, Patricia was crying silently at the defendant's table. Judge Hughes delivered some remarks before formally accepting the plea deal. She emphasized that HOA fraud was a serious crime that betrayed community trust. She noted that Patricia's abuse of power made her actions particularly egregious. While the plea agreement was fair, the judge wanted to ensure Patricia understood the full weight of her wrongdoing. Patricia was remanded to custody to begin serving her sentence. I watched as the bailiff led her out of the courtroom. I felt a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that justice was served, but sadness that things had escalated to this point. It all could have been avoided if Patricia had just been reasonable from the start. After the hearing, I met Gary and a few other residents for lunch at a diner in town. We talked about how far the community had come in the past year. You know what the craziest part is? Gary said. If Patricia had just said yes when you asked her to waive that first fine, none of this would have happened. She would still be HOA president, her crimes would have gone undiscovered, and everything would have continued as it was. Pride comes before a fall. someone else said. I thought about that. One $300 fine for a firewood delivery had set off a chain of events that exposed systemic corruption, led to criminal charges, and completely restructured the community's power dynamics. All because Patricia could not let go of control long enough to show basic human decency. The following week, I drove out to Forest Service Road 137 and parked near where my driveway connected to the logging road. I walked along the road for a while, enjoying the late winter sunshine filtering through the pine trees. A county maintenance truck passed by, the driver waving as he went past. This road had become a symbol of something larger. It represented the fact that there were always alternatives, always other options when someone tried to control you unfairly. Patricia had tried to restrict access and punish people for receiving deliveries. Instead, she inadvertently motivated us to find a better way that gave us more freedom and cost her more money. I thought about the economics of it all. That $30 delivery surcharge seemed small in isolation, but multiplied across dozens of deliveries per year, it added up quickly. The HOA was now paying significantly more for services that used to cost nothing, all because Patricia had insisted on enforcing petty rules. And that was not even counting the indirect costs. The legal fees, the administrative expenses, the damage to property values when the scandal became public, the difficulty recruiting new board members after everything that had happened. The true cost to the HOA was probably closer to $50,000 when you factored everything in. All of that from a $300 fine that never should have been issued in the first place. I returned home and spent the rest of the day working on a software update for my job. That evening, I lit a fire using wood that had been delivered through my back entrance, paid for by the HOA's community firewood program. The irony was not lost on me. Spring arrived in Colorado with its usual dramatic weather swings. One day would be 70 degrees and sunny. The next would bring a late-season snowstorm. The subdivision started coming alive again as residents emerged from their winter hibernation to work on yards and plan summer projects. The new HOA board approved several initiatives that improved life in Pine Valley estates. They negotiated better rates for snow removal and landscaping by putting contracts out for competitive bidding instead of steering business to connected vendors. They created a community garden on a previously unused plot of common land. They established a neighborhood watch program that actually focused on safety rather than catching people with unauthorized lawn decorations. Most importantly, they changed the culture. The HOA became something that served residents rather than controlled them. When people had questions or concerns, they got helpful responses instead of threats of fines. When someone needed an exception to a rule for legitimate reasons, the board worked with them to find solutions. It was everything an HOA should be but so rarely is. In April, I attended a community barbecue at the Pine Valley Estate's Common Area Pavilion. About 60 residents showed up, along with kids running around playing and dogs on leashes socializing. Gary manned the grill, flipping burgers and hot dogs while residents chatted and enjoyed the spring weather. I found myself talking with Rebecca, the woman who had spoken so passionately at that contentious July meeting about the evacuation delays. Her son was playing catch with some other kids nearby. "How is your son doing?" I asked. "Much better," she said. "We had a checkup last month and his asthma is well controlled, but I still get anxious thinking about that evacuation day. We could have been trapped if the fire had moved faster." The new board worked with the fire department to establish better emergency protocols. That should never happen again. I know, and I am grateful for everything you and Gary did to change things. I never had the courage to stand up to Patricia, but you did." "I just got mad about a firewood fine," I said with a smile. "Everything else followed from there," she laughed. "Well, your anger made a difference." As the afternoon progressed, I realized how much the community had changed. People were relaxed, friendly, engaged. There was no underlying tension, no fear of saying the wrong thing or attracting the wrong kind of attention from the HOA board. It felt like an actual neighborhood instead of a police state. Gary gave a short speech thanking everyone for coming and updating residents on various community projects. He mentioned the improved access through Forest Service Road 137 and how it had become a valuable asset during the wildfire evacuation. "We are also proud to announce that the HOA's legal troubles are behind us," Gary said. "The insurance company has reimbursed us for most of the money Patricia stole, and we have implemented financial controls to prevent anything like that from happening again. Our community is strong, our finances are solid, and our future is bright." People applauded. I noticed several residents glancing in my direction, and a few came over after the speech to thank me personally for my role in exposing the problems. I tried to deflect credit, but they insisted I had made a difference. As the sun began to set and families started packing up to leave, I helped Gary clean up the pavilion area. We loaded trash bags into his truck and wiped down the tables. "You ever think about what would have happened if you had just paid that fine and moved on?" Gary asked. "All the time," I said. "Patricia would probably still be embezzling money. The HOA would still be a nightmare to deal with, and I would be stuck driving through the main entrance hoping I did not violate some random rule. One person can make a difference. Or one person's stubbornness can accidentally improve things for everyone," I said with a laugh. "Take the credit, Walter. You earned it." We finished cleaning up and said our goodbyes. I drove home through the subdivision's main entrance, noting how different it felt now compared to a year ago. The gate was open and unmanned, no longer requiring permits or approvals. Delivery trucks came and went freely. The security guard booth had been converted into a little free library where residents could exchange books. Small changes, but they reflected a fundamental shift in how the community operated. That night, I sat on my back deck and looked out toward Forest Service Road 137. I could not see the road through the trees, but I knew it was there. My alternate access route, my escape hatch from Patricia's control, my inadvertent revenge that cost the HOA triple for every delivery. I thought about the lessons I had learned over the past year, about standing up for yourself when faced with unfair treatment, about the importance of knowing your rights and the law, about how small actions can have large consequences, both intended and unintended, about how corruption thrives in places where people do not ask questions or demand accountability. And I thought about firewood. A cord of firewood, something so mundane and ordinary, had become the catalyst for everything that followed. If I had ordered pizza that day instead of firewood, none of this would have happened. Patricia would have found some other way to assert control, and eventually someone else would have pushed back, but it would have been a different story with different details. But it was my story, my firewood, my fine, and I had turned it into something more. The following winter brought heavy snow to Colorado. My fireplace worked overtime keeping the house warm through multiple blizzards that blanketed Pine Valley estates in white. I ordered firewood twice more during the season, each time delivered through the back road at the HOA's expense. Gary texted me in January. "Just got the annual budget report. We spent $1,800 on delivery surcharges this year. Patricia would be rolling in her cell if she knew." I texted back. At least she has time to think about her choices. By the time spring arrived again, Patricia had served a year of her sentence and was up for early release. The parole board hearing was scheduled for May. Several residents submitted letters opposing her early release, citing the severity of her crimes and the harm she caused to the community. I did not submit a letter. I felt like I had said everything I needed to say at the sentencing hearing. Patricia would serve whatever time the justice system deemed appropriate, and that was fine with me. She was granted parole in late May, released under strict conditions including restitution payments, community service, and prohibitions on serving in any HOA leadership capacity. She moved out of Pine Valley Estates shortly after her release, selling her house at a significant loss due to the stigma of the scandal. I never saw her again after that day in court. Life continued in Boulder Creek and Pine Valley Estates. The HOA functioned smoothly under Gary's leadership and eventually transitioned to new board members as people's terms expired. The alternate access routes through Forest Service Road 137 became a permanent fixture, valued for their convenience and their role in emergency access. My initial investment of $4,000 to create the back driveway had paid for itself many times over in HOA-covered delivery fees. The satisfaction of knowing that Patricia's petness had backfired so spectacularly was worth far more than money anyway. I remained in contact with Tom at Mountain Ridge Timber. We became friends beyond just the customer-vendor relationship, sometimes meeting up for coffee or hiking. He always got a laugh out of telling the story to other delivery drivers about the HOA that fined someone for firewood and ended up paying triple for every delivery afterward. Years passed. The scandal faded from immediate memory, becoming part of the neighborhood's history that new residents learned about during casual conversations. The community remained strong, the HOA remained reasonable, and life went on. I eventually served a term on the HOA board myself, reluctantly agreeing after Gary convinced me it was important to maintain the positive culture we had built. My experience gave me insight into how HOAs could be run effectively while respecting residents' rights and autonomy. During my tenure, we codified policies protecting property owners' rights to alternate access points, established clear limits on HOA authority, and created transparent financial oversight systems. We also worked with other HOAs in the region to share best practices and prevent the kind of abuses that had occurred under Patricia's leadership. The story of the Firewood fine and everything that followed became something I told at parties, at community meetings, at HOA conferences where I sometimes spoke about governance reform. Each time I told it, people were amazed at how a $300 fine snowballed into a criminal investigation and systemic change. And each time I finished telling the story, someone would ask the same question. Do you regret any of it? The money you spent, the time and stress, all the conflict, my answer was always the same. Not for a second. Because sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even over something as simple as a firewood delivery. Sometimes you have to fight back against unreasonable authority. Sometimes you have to be willing to invest time and money and effort into doing things the right way, on principle. Because if you do not, people like Patricia will keep abusing their power. And sometimes, if you are lucky, your stand will inspire others to stand with you. Together, you can change things for the better. That was the real story, not just about firewood or fines or delivery routes. It was about a community finding its voice and taking back control from someone who had forgotten that leadership means service, not domination. As I sit here now, years later, with a fire crackling in my fireplace fueled by wood delivered through my back entrance at the HOA's expense, I think about that first day when I found Patricia's fine taped to my door. I remember the anger, the frustration, the sense of injustice. And I remember making the decision to do something about it instead of just accepting it. That decision changed everything. It changed the HOA, changed the community, and changed me. It taught me that fighting back against unfair treatment is not just about winning or losing. It is about refusing to let someone else dictate the terms of your life without pushing back. The firewood pops and sparks in the fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, snow falls gently over Pine Valley estates, covering the roads and roofs in pristine white. Somewhere out there, Forest Service Road 137 winds through the forest, providing access to homes and freedom to residents who value their independence. And somewhere, I hope, Patricia Meadowbrook thinks about the lesson she learned the hard way, that controlling people might work for a while, but eventually, someone will find another path. And that path might end up costing you far more than if you had just been reasonable in the first place. The fire burns warm, the house is comfortable, and all is well. That $300 fine turned out to be the best investment the HOA ever forced me to make, because it motivated me to create something better. A back road to freedom, a route around tyranny, and a lasting reminder that there is always another way if you are willing to look for it.